everyone, and welcome to our webinar on Quick Start Guidance on Deploying Power Apps the Right Way. My name is Mark Mickelson. I'm VP of Client Solutions here at JourneyTEAM. And our presenter for today will be Colby Beck, one of our senior solutions architects around Power Apps. Excited to have you all here today, and hope that you get out of this a lot of good information on Power Apps and how you can deploy them and how you can use them in your organization. On this next slide, want to go down just a little bit of kind of some housekeeping items for this webinar. First and foremost, for everyone to know, the session is being recorded. If you have questions, feel free to send those in the chat at any time. We will have time at the end to be able to answer or to respond to those questions and to get that feedback back to you guys. If for any reason we don't have the ability to answer a question before the end of this webinar, we'll be sure to follow up with you at the end through email or phone call to make sure we get your questions answered. Also at the end, we're going to have a survey link to make sure to fill that out. By doing so, you'll get entered into a drawing for a gift card, as well as get a copy of the slide deck that we're sharing with you guys today. All right, with that, I want to just go ahead and give a brief introduction to JourneyTEAM for those of you who are new. JourneyTEAM, we've been around for 29 years. We've been doing this for a while. We're over 140 team members. We've got a lot of Microsoft certifications, gold competencies, a lot of customers. Many of you are our customers and have a lot of good customer satisfaction. We do a lot of things within the Microsoft stack, and this next slide shows gives a kind of good breakdown of what we do, right? We do enterprise resource planning on the accounting side, the CRM systems, do Microsoft 365 and Azure, a lot with SharePoint and Teams, data and BI, and then we do have a change management adoption practice, and of course, Power Apps, which is what we're here to talk to you about today. So from an agenda standpoint, what we're going to break down, we're going to cover why does the Power Platform exist, which is what Power Apps is a part of. What is the Power Platform? Examples with lessons learned from some of the customers we've worked with, tools to govern, tips to deploy successfully. We're going to talk about our Power Apps Sherpa program, which will help you be able to deploy Power Apps fast and help you learn how to be able to continue to deploy Power Apps within your organization. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we'll wrap up with questions that you guys fire away in the chat. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to Colby and let him jump into Power Apps for us.
All right, thanks, Mark. Well, everyone, I'm going to share my screen. That way you can see my face. I can't see yours, but at least you can see mine. So it's going to be a good day. So we're going to get going on here and talk about why the Power Platform exists. And like Mark said, feel free to put your questions in the chat, and we'll get to them at the end. So why does the Power Platform exist? If you think about just even in the last 2 years, think about how much the workforce and our jobs have changed. A lot of that was due to a pandemic. Now a lot of more people are working remote. And we live in a world where employees need to be able to do the work on multiple different devices, whether they're on a mobile phone, a laptop, a tablet, or whatever type of device they're using. The business world requires that users are on different devices, which means that apps need to be created for those devices. But app development can be expensive. It's time consuming. It takes a lot of knowledge. It takes skilled people to create those apps. And so what happens is you have an organization that has all these requirements for apps that need to be created, but the amount of apps that actually get created is a lot smaller. So there gets to be a really big gap there. And also within your organization, think of all the apps that could be useful for all the different processes that use paper or that are complex. Now, when I say paper, I'm going to include, I know it's not paper, but I'm going to include Excel or Google Sheets. Excel is an amazing tool, and Google Sheets, they're both amazing tools. But if we have processes, major processes especially, that are relying heavily on those tools, we should probably rethink those processes and think, how can we utilize a database, or how can we control this process to eliminate user error, to make just the business run smoother, and to really provide a better business experience and better user experience for everyone. And so that is why there is the Power Platform, which is a low-code application. Low-code meaning you don't have to be a hardcore developer. You don't need to know C++. You don't need to know SQL to use the Power Platform, to use Power Apps or any of the tools therein to utilize these tools, which means that, yes, there is this massive gap where we need apps, but thanks to the Power Platform, we can quickly spin up applications, or we can quickly fix processes using all the tools that we've been provided to fill that gap. So let's quickly talk about what is the Power Platform, what are all the technologies involved, what they do, and then after that, we'll go over some examples to kind of get your creative juices flowing. So the Power Platform is made up of the core 4 technologies there in the center. So we have Power BI, Power Apps, Power Automate, and Power Virtual Agents. I'm mostly going to be talking about Power BI, Power Apps, and Power Automate, not too much about Power Virtual Agents. Power Virtual Agents is like an automated chatbot. Like I said, I'll mainly be focusing on the 3 to the left there. So Power BI is a data visualization tool. If you're familiar with Tableau or pivot charts in Excel, Power BI is 100 times better than anything out there. I'm very biased, but it is an amazing tool that can help you with the entire ETL process of getting your data, cleaning up, and displaying it to users. Then with Power Apps allows us to quickly spin up apps. There's multiple different types of apps. I'll explain those a little bit later that we can deploy within our organization, so our employees can use them to help them with processes. And then we have Power Automate, which helps us automate processes. Power Automate is also called Flow. You'll hear those terms used interchangeably. Obviously, it's easier to say Flow. So the Power Platform is built upon a data layer. So you see there in the bottom left, the Dataverse. The Dataverse is part of the Power Platform. It's a cloud-based database that you don't need to know SQL to use, which is super nice. You don't have to write queries. It's a nice interface where you can just get in and you can see all of your tables. You can see all of your columns, your data types. You can add columns. You can add tables. Super quick and easy. And all the different tools within the Power Platform can use the data from the Dataverse, and they mesh perfectly well with it because it is part of the Power Platform. But you don't have to use the Dataverse. You can also connect to, there's over 300 different data connectors that you can connect these different tools to. And if Microsoft doesn't have that data connector already created, then you can also create custom data connectors. So really, sky's the limit with what your data sources can be for the Power Platform. You can utilize SQL, Oracle, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, if you're into all that stuff, and you can pull data from those to actually put them in Power BI reports to mess with the data with Power Apps or to automate that data. And then there at the top level, we have Dynamics, Office, and Azure. Those are the tools that are going to be controlling the security of our users, of who's using our applications, who can see our applications, and who can benefit from those. So when you think about the Power Platform, there are the 3 A's, which are to automate, and then analyze and act, which I kind of talked about in the previous slide. So Power BI, Power Apps, and Power Automate, they all work together in both ways. You can embed Power Apps into Power BI. You can embed Power BI into Power Apps, and then you can use Power Automate to automate data that gets sent to Power BI, or you can automate data that is acted upon in Power Apps. So it's really cool. Once you start using all these tools, it really opens a lot of doors for what your organization can do and the solutions that you can create for all of your end users. And it's super exciting because you can be as creative as you want. The way I always think about this, so I grew up on a farm in Idaho, and there was times where I'd be driving the tractor and all night plowing the field or whatever, and something would break, and all I would have would be a screwdriver and a bolt, and I had to try to figure out how can I fix this problem with just these tools. Now, obviously, that's a really simple example, but the Power Platform, the tools that they've given us are Power BI, Power Apps, and Power Automate. So we have these tools, we have our boundaries, we know what we can do. Now, how can we take these tools and fix or improve whatever process or issues that our business is facing? So it's super exciting. So the reason why the Power Platform is so empowering, why it equals empowering, is because it can take a citizen developer and it can make you feel like you're a pro developer without actually being a pro developer. Like I said previously, you don't need to know how to code. I often tell people, if you can create PowerPoint and write functions in Excel, the chances are you're going to pick up pretty quickly on the Power Platform and being able to build apps, implement Power Automate, and create Power BI reports. Obviously, as with any tool, there is a little bit of a learning curve, but it's a quick and easy way to get started, and you can go ahead and start building today, which is super cool about the Power Platform. All right, pop quiz. What do all of these organizations have in common? The answer is they all use the Power Platform. Unfortunately for the Miami Dolphins, the Power Platform does not make you play football better, but I am sure they have some slick processes in the background that help manage, I don't know, paychecks or whatever it is. So the Power Platform, a lot of organizations use it. If you're using Microsoft products today, if you're using Microsoft 365, Office 365, but not using the Power Platform, then you are missing out on a lot of opportunities to improve your entire organization. All right. Now I'm going to go through some examples of apps that I have created. I'm going to talk about the use cases behind the apps, a little bit about the organization, what they do, so you can know why we needed to build this app, what the process was before we built the app. And you're also going to see the three different types of Power Apps that I'm going to talk about today through these examples. So the three different types of apps are Canvas apps, model-driven apps, and recently added are custom pages. All these apps can be used in conjunction with each other, and they're all very powerful when used however you want to use them. So the first example was for a agricultural business. They were based in California, and they had farm managers who were in charge of all the employees, and they needed to make sure that the working conditions every day were okay. The reason for this is because OSHA wanted to make sure that the businesses weren't taking advantage of employees, that no one was in harm's way. And so the previous process was they had paper forms that the farm managers would drive around to each one of the fields. They'd fill out this paper form all day. I think it was for each field, they had to do a daily check, a Bonio report, and a weather check 3 times a day. So they had to go to each field 3 times a day and fill out this paper sheet. And then at the end of the day, go back to the office and fax all of those sheets to headquarters, where the data would either be manually inputted into a database, or they would just be filed away. For the day when OSHA would say, hey, we want to check all your files, then they could give them just a stack of paper and say, here you go, you can read through all these. Obviously, it worked for a few years, but it's not the best process. It's a process that could be improved. So what we did is we created an app where the farm managers now can, just as they're driving to the fields, they can put in their daily checklist, their Bonnier reports, and their weather checks, all from within the app, all at the same time, and submit it. Obviously, it saves into the database, and that all the data in the database from the admin's perspective is then accessible via a model-driven app, where they can go in and they can see actually what actually is going on with the conditions of their workforce. And so the next time when OSHA comes, instead of having to hand them a stack of papers, they can just say, hey, here's this report. They can just pull the report and they can actually see how have the employees been treated over the last few years. Now, the real tricky part with this app is it needed to work without internet access, which is a very tricky thing, but it is possible. There is an out of the box functionality with Canvas apps where apps can work without internet. But word to the wise is be careful, because once you start dealing with no internet, you have to start managing your data. You're holding that data and you're trying to pass it from the user's device when you save it to their device. And once they get internet, you want to save that up to the internet. Not to the internet, to the Dataverse or the database. So trying to manage that state can be tricky. So know that it is possible to work in offline, but you need to make sure that your architecture is super simple and clean, and that users aren't overriding other users' data because they're waiting to get internet access. So this next example shows how using a Canvas app with a model-driven app, it kind of showcases how the power there that can be used. So this was also for an agricultural business that dealt with commodities. And every day, this company, they get shipments of different commodities in and shipments out. And so they needed some sort of inventory system to track how many tons of barley is leaving, how many tons of barley is coming in. The previous process would be they would take a picture of a slip, they'd fill it out with paper, they'd write down all the information, and then they'd send that piece of paper. If it didn't get lost, they'd take it to their headquarters or to their manager's office, and then they would take that information, they would type it into Excel, and then eventually that data would get inputted into their inventory system. So a lot of different steps were happening. The paper to Excel to their inventory system. So what we did is we created an app. So over there on the left, you can kind of see the two little apps there. That's the app that the employees who are actually at the weigh stations would be using to type in all the information for when a truck would come in with commodities or would be leaving with commodity. They can type in the information. They could take any pictures if they needed, and then it would save it to the Dataverse. And then over there on the right, this was the admin's view. So this is what a model-driven app looks like. A model-driven app is basically it's scaffolded for you. You tell a model-driven app, these are the data tables I want to point to, and then the app is created. It looks, if you use dynamic CRM, it looks a lot like CRM. The reason why is because CRM is a model-driven app. So with this model-driven app, the admins were able to see exactly how many tons were leaving and going, the amount of contracts that were being signed, the amount of tickets that were being created, all the invoices, and they were able to see how the inventory would fluctuate as tickets and commodities were coming in and out. So it was a very cool process to see change for them. This next example was for a consulting group, but this would apply to really any organization where employees need to keep track of their hours. This is just a basic timesheet app. But the specific use case that made it a little bit tricky is a lot of these employees were based in California. And if you're in California and deal with hourly employees, you might know that for every X amount of hours an employee works, they have to have a meal break, and they need to record the start and stop time as well as the description for that break. Obviously, if you're doing that via Excel or handwritten, it can be pretty tedious and things can get lost. And you want to, I guess in California, you want to make sure you're, obeying the government over there. So what we did is we made it a lot simpler where the employees can just open up this app on whatever device they're on, and they can type in those entries over there on the right. You can see they can add a break entry, or they can actually select the specific surface item that they're using and put times towards that item. And then when they're done with all that, they can submit their time, which then pushes it off to invoicing and then into their accounting system, all automatically using flows and different integrations. And that allows them to get paid and allows them to bill their clients. So it's a pretty simple use case, but it's pretty powerful because it's really driving the core of the business because everyone gets paid, which everyone likes to at the end of the day. So the next app was for a winery in California that had a lot of guests come to have tours and different wine tasting experiences at their winery. And they needed a better way for hosts and hostesses to keep track of which guests are coming, what type of allergies do people have they completed their event, are they checked in, are they checked out, are there any notes for today, who's scheduled to work today. And so we created this app to have all that in one spot. So all the hosts need to do would open up the app and see exactly who's coming today and have all the information in there. And the lesson learned from this app is when you're building a Canvas app or any app, you have to simplify the process, not just because it's better for the end users, but it's also better for the app. The more icons and widgets and pictures and buttons on your screen, the slower your app is going to run. So when you first build your apps, it's probably going to look pretty messy at first, but through time, when you're doing your testing, cut out as much as possible and get your app just to the bare bones of just what you need and cut out all the fluff. This is a very similar app. This was used for an organization that holds big events, and their team needed a way similar to the previous app. They just needed a way to check in guests, to be able to see if they had the right mobile numbers for those users, to see which activities they were participating in and what their accommodations were. That way they made sure everyone was taken care of, as well as to keep notes. The tricky part about this app is we knew when we created that we would not have time to train the end users to use the app because this organization was going to hire third-party employees to actually do the checking in. And so we didn't have time to actually train the users. So we needed to create an app in such a way where you didn't have to because it was so intuitive. And there was a few lessons learned from this event where we could have improved the app, but for the majority of the time, the feedback was that this app was simple to use and no training was necessary, and everyone picked up on it. So when you're building apps, always have that goal in mind of tell yourself, I do not want to train anyone how to use this app. If I'm telling them how to use it, then chances are I could have designed it better. There's a caveat to that. Obviously, there are some processes that are pretty intense and pretty complex that you do need to do training because some things are hard to simplify. But if you're always pushing to simplify your apps, then chances are they will be better. Now, this last app used both Canvas apps, it used a model-driven app, and it also used a custom page, which I mentioned earlier. And this was probably one of my favorite projects I worked on because the business impact has been tremendous and it has definitely improved the process. So this is for a university where they obviously have hundreds and hundreds of students who are grading assignments, as well as thousands of students that are submitting assignments to be graded. And all of those assignments live and the submissions live in a technology called Canvas. If you're familiar with Instructure, it's just a learning software platform where students can log in and fulfill assignments, hit submit, and they can get graded. But there was an issue with Instructure where it was hard to keep track of if I have 100 graders all grading the same course, how do I know who's grading what? Assignments were getting double graded. It was just pretty confusing to keep track of. So what this university did to fix that problem is they used a Google spreadsheet, and it was a very well done spreadsheet, I will say, that helped just kind of manage the queue, but it wasn't a spreadsheet, which spreadsheets lead to lots of errors. So what we did is we created a Canvas app that only shows the grader the assignments and the submissions for the sections that they are a part of. And then over there on the right, we actually embedded Power BI tiles that filter down to the user who's opening up the app. So from those tiles, they're able to see how many assignments are ready to be graded. They can see how many are in progress, how many have been completed, and they can also see their average turnaround. So this is a test user, so you can see that the average turnaround in days, there's only one bar because this is a test user, but for other graders, they can see the last 2 weeks. They can see for each day what their average turnaround time for grading time was. So the power of this app was it simplified the grading process for all those graders. And they have hundreds of graders, both in the US and internationally, that needed a way to be able to know these are the assignments that need to be graded that haven't been graded, and they only see those assignments. The real tricky part was, what do you do when you have 100 graders, 30 courses, and those graders are all assigned to different courses to grade? How do you manage that process? So when we first created it, we had a model-driven app that it took about 10 to 12 clicks to figure out exactly who was grading what, to remove graders, to add graders, and the process took a long time and a lot of effort to figure things out. And it was hard to know if you ever actually made a mistake until a grader said, hey, I'm getting the wrong sections, and then they had to contact their managers who would contact the admins to go in and make that change and make that fix. So we needed a way to simplify a model-driven app. So what we did is we created a custom page. And so like I said, this isn't a model-driven app. Over there on the left, you can see how that looks just like Dynamics CRM. Up at the top, you can obviously see it says Dynamics 365. It's because this is a model-driven app. But there in the center, that is a custom page. It looks just like a Canvas app. It's because you build a page the same way you would a Canvas app. So over there on the left, we're able to list out all the graders. And this is where you can also add graders. You could search for your graders. And you can actually click the view sections. And then over on the right, that lists filters to show that these are the sections that this grader grades. And then you can also remove those. And then if you want to click on a section there in the center one, you could click on the section. And you can see exactly which sections or which graders are assigned to each section. So this improved the visibility for the whole organization to know who is grading what. It simplified the process, and they're planning to continue to scale this process and to share this process with other colleges within the university. The reason why this process or this project was so successful in my mind and this was one of those hindsight moments, is they had all the use cases listed out for us. They knew exactly what their graders needed. And while we were building this, we were working with end users and they were testing out while we were building. So we had that immediate feedback to know that we're headed in the right direction. And that's why this project in my mind was so successful, is because we had that buy-in through the whole time where all the end users knew exactly what was being built and they knew how it was going to help them and improve their lives, essentially. So those are all the examples. Obviously, I've built a lot more apps than this. These are just a few I just want to highlight that I thought they were fun projects to work on. They all kind of had their special use cases, and hopefully to kind of give you some good ideas of how you can build apps to apply them to your organizations. So obviously, there's a lot to the Power Platform. And once your organization starts building apps and Power Automates flows and chatbots, all sorts of things, you need a way to govern that, to know what's being built, how's it being used, what are my data levels looking at. So luckily, Microsoft has provided us with a few tools to do so. So the first tool is the Power Platform Admin Center. This is just a given service that is part of the Power Platform that you can open up and you can see exactly how many app launches are happening. You can see how many data active users are using your apps. You can control all of your environments. You can create new environments. This is also where you can handle some licensing, which I'm going to talk about a little bit after these next few sections. And you can do all that within the admin center. And like I said, this is all just out of the box. If you use the Power Platform, you have this just ready to go, which is super nice. But I will say there are some drawbacks to the admin center, and it's a pretty generic, high level view, because maybe knowing how many daily active users across all apps, yeah, it's helpful, but I want to know, what about for these specific apps? How many users are using these apps or using these flows? So if you want that, the tool is called the Center of Excellence. The Center of Excellence, it is a package that you can implement, you can deploy into your organization that will give you an overview of everything, and you can get down to the nitty-gritty of which environments have which apps, of those apps, who's using them, how many people are using them, how much data do I have, how are my environments looking. This takes about 4 to 8 hours to implement. But the nice thing is Microsoft updates this regularly, because Microsoft is investing a ton of money into the Power Platform and into Power Apps to try to make it better and better. And so obviously the data that we can glean from that is always going to be changing. And so they're always updating this Center of Excellence. So as your business continues to grow and use the Power Platform and the Center of Excellence to help guide you, Microsoft will continue to improve upon it. And this is something where we at JourneyTEAM, we help customers implement this. But the nice thing is Microsoft has provided step-by-step guide out there. If you just Google Center of Excellence startup, there is a step-by-step guide to do the whole implementation. And like I said, it takes between 4 to 8 hours, depending on your level of expertise, but it's really pretty straightforward. Just follow the instructions and move along the line. So if you're new to Microsoft, you're going to love this. Licensing is super confusing for most products. Obviously, it's hard to manage when you have so many products. Licensing can just be confusing, really, it's not just Microsoft, it's really any organization, massive organization like that. To manage all your products, licensing can be confusing. But at a very simple level, this is the licensing that you use for Power Apps. And so I'm just going to move from left to right. So the first one is the per app plan. And also, I guess a little note, they just cut the prices in half back in August. So this used to be $10 and $40 for the per app plan, a per user plan. The per app plan, it's super nice. It gets one user access to one app per month. Now, who that user is, it does not matter when it comes to a per app, or yeah, for the per app license. A per app license is also called an app pass. It's a concurrency base. So I like that they call it an app pass because it's like a hall pass. If someone's using it, that means it's not available. If no one's using it, that means it's available and someone can come in and they can use it. Obviously, it's only going to work for users who are inside your tenant, whether they're guest users inside your Azure Active Directory, whether they're guest users or actual users. They'll be the only ones who can access the app. But it's only $5, and it's super awesome. I also think about if your organization has employees here in the United States and then in India, obviously completely different time zones. And chances are they aren't going to be using apps at the same time. So if you have 10 employees here and 10 in India, that's 20 employees, but you actually only need to get 10 per user licenses because only 10 employees are using those licenses at the same time. So that is a super nice, and it's a huge cost savings to use that, and it definitely simplifies the whole licensing process. The next license is the per user plan. This gives a user unlimited amounts of apps, which is super nice, but this license is assigned to a direct person. So if I am a user of a Power App and I have a per user license, I'm the only one who can use that license because it's assigned to my user. It is my license, but that means I can have unlimited apps. So obviously it's more expensive, but unlimited apps is pretty cool. So really the line you draw is if people need to access more than one app, then get them a per user plan. If they're only going to be using one app, then they just need a per user. Then the per app license. Sorry, it can get confusing. So for that university, to kind of go back, they have all those graders. Obviously, they don't want to give hundreds of graders a per user plan because that would be very expensive. That's why we opted to use the per app plans because it's $5 per user. It's very cheap. And where they have users both in the US and internationally, they don't actually have to license the entirety of all their graders. They can just do a nice little pool and let the graders use those licenses as they come in and come out to grade. And then the last license is the pay-as-you-go plan. This is a lot newer. I have not implemented this at any clients, but you can pay $10 per active user per app per month. Like I said, I haven't used this one quite yet. This is pretty new, but it is another option out there if you want to do as a pay-as-you-go. If you have apps where a user isn't going to use them every month, then yeah, maybe it might be nice just to use the pay-as-you-go plan. That way, you just pay when they use it. All right. It's been a lot of talking, but this is the part that really excites me. When you're deploying Power Apps, you have the opportunity to really change your organization, but it's not an easy task and it's not an easy thing to do. And you need to make sure you're doing the right steps so you can ensure that your project is successful. So these are just a few things where if you were to Google app deployment processes or best practices, you'd see these same ideas and same steps. But chances are that if you're implementing the Power Platform or Power Apps, you aren't a pro developer and you haven't been doing these sorts of implementations, which is totally fine because the Power Platform obviously is built for citizen developers, people who aren't developers who haven't done this before. So that's why I just want to bring these top of mind for you to think about while you're building your apps. And I've kind of touched a little bit on some of these points because I have failed almost on all of these steps throughout the way. But that's the beauty of Canvas apps and Power Apps is you can iterate very quickly because it's quick and easy to make changes. So even if you do quote fail, you can quickly iterate and fix that. So number one, understand who you're building your apps for. Who is going to be using this app and what is the use case? So when I say create user stories, think of the phrase, as a consultant, I need to be able to submit my time. That way I can bill my customers properly. So for that use case, internally here at JourneyTEAM, obviously we're consultants. So I built an app that helps our consultants do just that. It helps us keep track of our time. So you have to understand who the end user is and what they're going to be using the apps or flows for. And then make sure you get buy-in. If end users are not involved in the app development process, not necessarily creating the app, but at least giving feedback, they aren't going to feel buy-in. So the example of this from my life is back when I was a wee lad a few years ago in college. I had a class where we were supposed to develop an app. And like I mentioned, I grew up on a farm. So my family we have 30,000 head of cattle. So a lot of manure, a lot of cows, and there's a lot of cows coming in and out being shipped on shipments and truckloads. And they keep track of all that in Excel, and it breaks my heart. So a few years ago, I was like, I'm going to create an app to make it where they can keep track of all the cows, a little inventory system. They can just type in their numbers and we can know what dairies cows are coming from and really simplify it. So I built this app and I never once talked to the people who are actually keeping track of all that information. And I showed up to the farm. I told my dad, I was like, hey, I know technology. I built this app for you. Let me go show it to people. And I got it downloaded on everyone's phones. I showed the employees how to use it, and then I left, and then they never used it again. Lesson learned, they had absolutely zero buy-in in the process. Yes, it might have improved the process, but they didn't understand how it could or why it could, because I just showed up, said, hey, I built this, use it, and they didn't care about it. And they just continued doing business as usual and using Excel. And they still use Excel to this day. It still breaks my heart. So make sure you have buy-in, include your end users, talk to them and listen to them. And then when you're designing your apps, simplify, simplify, simplify in both your design and the process. First time you build your app, sometimes it's just like a mind splat. You're just trying to get everything onto your app. Once you get there, start cutting things out. Start eliminating icons, eliminating buttons, eliminating drop downs that you don't need. Really get your app to just the core principles. Avoid all the fluff and just get it as simple as possible. And when your app is recreating a process, make sure you're simplifying that process as well. Take the opportunity that you have to build an app to simplify a process. Don't recreate Excel. If you're building an app that all it is a table where a person can change data, then they might as well be using Excel. Do not recreate Excel. Also, I apologize. I do love Excel. I know I've been talking bad about it, but I do love it. I use it a lot. But when we're dealing with processes and building apps, we don't want to recreate what's already been created. We want to simplify processes and make it the experience for our end users the best experience possible. And then once you've created those apps, make sure you actually watch your users use the app. There's been countless times where I built an app and I've gone to bed thinking, that is the most beautiful app. I go home, I show my wife, I say, look at this app, it's beautiful. And she says, good job, I love you. And then the next day, I have a user use the app and they continually make mistakes in the app. But the reason why the end user makes mistakes is because the app is designed poorly. A lot of times you'll hear people, they talk about the end users and they kind of talk bad about end users, say they always make mistakes, they break things. If end users are making mistakes, it's because the process or the tool that they were given isn't designed properly. So watch your users use the app, see where they make mistakes, and then fix it and tweak it and simplify it. So those are my hot tips of how to deploy the right way. So that was a lot of information I just threw out at you. There is licensing you need to worry about. There's governing you need to worry about. There's all these different technologies you need to worry about. They all interact with each other. It can be pretty confusing and hard to get going, which is why here at JourneyTEAM, we created a program called the Power Apps Sherpa program. This program's great because you own the process. It's your app. You're going to be the one creating it, but you're going to have us to guide you through the process. So it's a 5-week implementation schedule that includes 9 workshops, access to senior consultants. You have 4 one-on-one sessions of 90 minutes each, and then you obviously have community access to share ideas and resolve issues. This is a really cool program because we really want to empower you to own your Power Platform and to own your apps. We don't want to build any dependencies. We really want you to be able to implement the Power Platform, to implement apps, and really just to take off and run with it. And so with the Sherpa program, we can help guide you. We can answer those questions. If you're going to do an app that is going to be offline, we can say, hey, from our experience using this, you need to change this. If you've designed an app and we think, hey, that looks ugly, it's nothing personal, but we're going to help you try to get that app to make it look a little bit better. So that is the Sherpa program, and it is a great benefit to your organization. Here are a few links. Just get started. If you want to get started today with the Power Platform, you can go to make.powerapps.com. Log in. I would recommend just logging in there right now to see if you have access, kind of playing around and seeing what's going on there. And obviously, there's a ton of documentation out there. There are a ton of community forums. There's YouTube, which I use all the time. And then most importantly, there's us here at JourneyTEAM in the Sherpa program where we can help out with anything that you need. All right. So now we can turn the time over to questions. If we have those in the chat, or if anyone has any questions, feel free to message those in and we can answer those questions. We can talk about it. And this is scheduled to go until 11, so we have about 20 minutes for questions, but we can end as early or as late as we need. And yes, I can send those links in the chat. All right, can you discuss environments and how they relate to the Power Platform? Yes, I can. So within the Power Platform, you have different environments. I like to think of different environments as silos of information. So every time you deploy an environment, it's going to have its own database or its Dataverse implement or its own Dataverse instance. So all the data is going to live within inside that environment. So each environment, it's like I said, it's its own silo. The apps exist in that environment and they interact with apps in that environment. The flows interact with flows in that environment. They all live inside that environment. How I often use environments is I often create a dev environment, a UAT environment, and a production environment. So I'll push things from obviously in dev, and I'll push it along, have the users test in UAT, and then obviously production is where the end users are actually using the environments. Hopefully I answered your question, Eric. All right. So next question, can you discuss the process of implementing offline capabilities into a Power App? Yes. The process of implementing. So first I would say figure out why you need to do offline, and then figure out the minimum amount of data that your users will need to have offline. So how offline works is there is a command in Power Apps called load data, where you can actually save data to the user's device. And there's also another function in Power Apps where you can tell if that user is connected or not. And so what you can do is if the user loses connection, you can quickly save all the information to their device. That way it's just local on their device. And then as soon as they get internet access again, that flag of saying, hey, do they have access will flip onto yes. Once it flips onto yes, you can have it save all that information to the data, to whatever database you're using. Like I said, things do get tricky because you're trying to manage state. You want to make sure that the data that you're saving to their device isn't something that another user can overwrite. So in that example of the agriculture business where farm managers were saving their little OSHA reports, no user had access to any, or no farm manager had access to any other farm manager's reports, meaning they could create reports online, offline, and wouldn't touch anything that anyone else did. So you want to make sure things are siloed to make sure that people aren't overwriting the data, and then really just make sure you build out your data architecture correctly to make sure so it works. Okay, let me make sure. Hopefully I answered your question. Keanu? Let's see. From Jasmine, we have, what is the most common question you get from your clients? Licensing. And I see there's a licensing question, so I'm going to put that into 2. Can you discuss licensing requirements for a multi-environment development model? Yes. So with the per user license, that's going to work across environments. So me, Colby Beck, I have a per user license. That means I can build apps in all my environments, and I'm good to go. They say per user, yes. The per app license is actually assigned to the environment that you're in. So if I have my UAT or my dev UAT in production environment, if all my users are in production, I'm going to assign those per app licenses to my production environment because that's where my users actually are. So you want to have your per app licenses in the environment where your users will actually be using the apps. But if you're using per user license, then you don't need to worry about it because they'll be able to build apps in their different environments as necessary. Did that answer your question, Dan? Dan says, yeah, awesome. Thanks, Dan. Next question from Cassie. Could a Microsoft Access database be converted using Power Apps? Yes, you could. Well, I guess using Power Apps, are you saying you just want to move the data from Access into the Dataverse and Dataverse? Yes. Yeah, so in that case, what I would do is just do a data import and take your data from Access and just import it into the Dataverse. Nothing wrong with Microsoft Access, but the Dataverse is going to be a lot more powerful and more scalable than Microsoft Access. And also the user interface is a lot better. And so, yeah, so you could import that data into the Dataverse, and then you can start building Power Apps based off the data inside the Dataverse, which is awesome. Thanks for your question, Cassie. Yes, yeah, so the user interface for the Dataverse, it's pretty awesome. Obviously, like anything, it takes just a little bit to learn, but it's really not that bad. And when you want users to be able to create new columns, new fields, super awesome, super quick and easy. And yeah, it's a good place to start. All right, from Eric, is a Dataverse a relational database? Should the tables be normalized? Yes, the Dataverse is a relational database, uses primary keys, foreign keys, all that fun stuff. They have different names for them. They call it just lookups instead of keys. But yeah, I mean, it depends what your use case is for your data. But I would say when you're using the tables in the Dataverse, that we should always be normalizing our data, because that will make building apps off that data a lot simpler and a lot easier to consume. And I should say, the Dataverse, it actually is from the technical side, I think it's I forgot the technical name. It's essentially SQL though, in the back end, in the cloud. All right, looks like Mark is saying, to add to the questions about licensing, Canvas and model-driven apps are for licensed users. You can choose to license a contractor or vendor and give them access to a Power App. Yes, that is correct. You can add guest users into your tenant. So here at JourneyTEAM, if I was to add, I guess I could, if one of our IT guys was to add someone from a different organization, they could retain their normal email address from their organization and be inside our tenant and have access to one of my apps if I share that app specifically with them. Cassie May, any good trainings available if the Sherpa pricing is out of budget? Yes, there is obviously a lot of really good documentation out there for how to get started with the Power Apps. There is also a course taught, an app in a day course. I don't know the next time we're teaching one of those, but Microsoft regularly has courses that they're free. It's an 8-hour course that takes all day, and it's a crash course through building Canvas apps, model-driven apps, flows, approval flows, BI, and chatbots. But it takes about 8 hours. But yeah, but there are trainings available out there that they are free. And for Mr. Dan, add on to my previous question, how many environments can a per user license actually spin up with the amount of storage that comes with the license? That is a tricky question. How many environments? I do not know the answer to that question, Dan. I apologize. I've only ever created at most 3 environments. I know here at JourneyTEAM, we have a lot of different environments. But no, I've never seen any issues with creating a lot of environments. And worst case is if you get a little alert that says, hey, you need to check your data limits, then there are ways where you can buy extra storage space. So if you ever do run up to issues with data storage issues, because you don't have enough licenses or you have too many environments, if something like that happens, then you can purchase add-on capacity. Thanks for your question, Dan. And good luck, Cassie. A lot of good resources. YouTube's also really helpful.
And Dan, to add to that, on a per user license, you have unlimited apps, unlimited environments you can do. But like what Colby just mentioned, it's about storage, right? So depending upon how much storage you're going to have in each app, you may need to pay for that additional storage.
Yep. Thanks, Mark.
We appreciate everybody attending, and we look forward to hopefully chatting with you more about Power Apps and helping you guys get them to putting them to good use.